We're going in a few more seconds. Okay, attendees are here, so we've got perfect. I think we're live.
Cool.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are dialing in from the world. My name is Sven Wegner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mainstage Incubator. And today we are here for our technical coffee chat series, actually our second technical coffee chat series. And our guest today is Pawel Pieczul. He is the engineering manager at Intel, and he will be guiding us through the Vuca world and the Stephen framework. Hey, Pawel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sven. Hello, everybody. I hope that we will have chance to have some interaction during this presentation. So I'd like to quickly ask if I can hear any of you. So anyone volunteering to speak up, can you say something? So we'll check the connection if it works the other way too.
Perfect. So the way it works for everyone who has not used AirMeet before, on the right bar there's a raise hand button. So if you press that, you'll be allowed to come on stage and talk to us. So just for the testing for the session, would anybody please volunteer and raise their hand so we can test this out?
No volunteers.
Everybody's shy, so I'm going to pick someone from the audience. Who wants to raise a hand? Well, I see that Debashish just joined the call. Debashish, why don't you raise the hand and let's check out the tech if it's working or not. Oh, there you go.
Yes, there it is.
And there we go.
Hi, Pawel. How are you? Hi, Sven. How are you? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. So it works very well.
Well, I'll just switch on my video. Welcome.
Okay. We can see you.
Yes, great to see you. So, looking forward to today's session.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start. I think I encourage you very much to speak up and raise the hand through this tool. If you have questions or comments, or if you have very interesting examples, then don't hesitate. Just come on and share them with us. So I'll be showing some slides. I'll start sharing pretty soon. But the slides are not everything. So I hope the presentation will be much more interesting if we exchange our experiences around the things and not just keep it the monologue from my side. So please don't be shy and share your perspectives along the way. I will try to share the screen now. So I'm actually using the application for the first time. So please give me some benefit of the doubt if I make something wrong. I hope I won't. Okay, now you should see the first slide. Managing complexity in Vuca world. It's a very, very topic that's really relevant to today's times, I think. And I would like to begin with a bit of a glimpse over the ages, actually. So if we look at the development of the humans and our world, then we can see those lots of developments in the area of getting first stones, then bronze tools, then iron tools, and so on. Then we had the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, Baroque, which is not on the slides. So a long way up to the Industrial Revolution. And if we look at this from the very beginning of the mankind until our century, so the first things which we see is that for the majority of the time in which we were developing, so our life was very strongly dependent on what? Agriculture, the labor of the hands, and sometime closer to our times, it started depending on the trade and on the craftsmanship. So the Industrial Revolution especially brought us the globalization of the automation and machinery. And this whole thing was going up to today's time. And I put a question mark in today's time because I really wanted to think for a while about if we call the times of the past the times of the Iron Age or the times of the Renaissance, what's the best description of our today's time? And I would like to ask you, if you have ideas, please share. So if, according to you, how would you best describe our times? These are the times of what? Do we have any volunteer who would like to share the opinion?
Just to remind everyone, if you would like to come on stage, you can press the raise hand button on the top right of the Airmeet.
There's no good or bad answer, of course. Everyone has different points, perspective on those things.
If you're shy, you can also post it into the chat. Come on, guys, let's make this interactive.
Of course, you can post this to the chat.
So Charles Rippert is calling it the information age.
Very good, absolutely, information age. Others, what comes to your mind?
Petros, okay, you're.
So I understand exponential meaning the pace in which technologies are being developed. 5G, communication, basically, lot age, exponential virus, definitely, exponential technology and exponential virus. Yes, so these are, of course, all good observations. My preference is, and that's not better, not worse than anyone else, I think maybe it's worse, is that today's time, today's ages are the age of uncertainty. And of course, the rest is very true. So why uncertainty? Let's take a look at, I'll try to switch the slide now. So let's take a look at such chart. Actually, anyone can generate this chart on the web page, which is called our working data, and then choose different points, different lines on that chart. But this is basically the adoption of the technology in the US across last century and this century. So what we see here is exactly like this majority of comments here about the exponential growth and the information age. So on the left side, the development of technologies like running water, which is a breakthrough, really. Electricity access. What else do we have here? Deadline. This should be television. So the more we are getting close to 2020, the more the slopes are vertical. So the time to adopt new technologies reduced from tens of years or centuries to how much? Maybe a year, maybe more, maybe less. And it keeps on going that way. I don't know if there is a boundary to that. But the observation is that the pace in which everything is happening is getting more and more dense. And everything is basically going crazy in a way that we perceive this. So because of this fast pace of the adoption of the technology and the amount of technologies, amount of the things which are happening, we experience a lot of uncertainty. And that's why my response to the question, what age we live in, is this is the age of uncertainty. And with uncertainty, of course, comes a lot of other factors like stress, frustration, and generally inability to cope with the world in which we live in. So that's where we come to what Vuca work is. And you may be already familiar with the term. I think this term was brought by the US military. And US military was experiencing what we are experiencing now, probably 10 to 20 years before, to a larger extent than the rest of the population, as they were struggling with their operations, around different parts of the world. Those may be controversial operations, but the conclusions from them is that the methodologies which the US Army had been using up to the 80s stopped working at some point. And they started thinking why they stopped working, and they analyzed the situation in which they had to operate, and they described the situation in those four terms. So this was basically what they called Vuca, and Vuca stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so my opinion is that this is a great description of the world in which we live this year, specifically with all the virus craziness going around the world. So maybe it's worth to think about what this really means, those four words. And some of them will have very large implications to the way that we will have to deal with the world today. So we'll follow up on especially complexity, but let's see. So volatility means that basically this is kind of a butterfly effect. Things now happen as a result of very small changes in the environment. Very big effects are happening, and in an unobvious way. Uncertainty, that's my favorite one. This means that the predictability is out in today's world. So we cannot predict anymore. This makes it very difficult for us to plan things because, predictability is out. Complexity relates to how things are entangled with each other. So that the causality, the cause and effect relationship is not anymore valid. So if we see something happening, it's very difficult for us to understand why we see that, why those things are happening. So we'll focus on that more next. But the last one, ambiguity, is related to the difficulty in interpreting the world that we see. So we see things, but we are unsure what they really mean. And there are no more clear explanations and no more simple answers. So how does it sound for a world to live in? I think pretty terrible for me. So if we look at that one after the other, the view is pretty pessimistic. And this is not natural for us to deal with the world like that, because our brain is basically wired inside to seek for logical explanations, to seek for causality, for the cause and effect relationships. And we try to explain everything we see in those terms, and we try to see order in the world. And now there is less and less order. Okay. So what? So maybe I should ask if anyone would like to agree or disagree with that. I just tried to present the very pessimistic view of the world we live in, but do you agree this is true, or you don't agree this is true? Anyone would like to share their perspective? True. Thank you. So I'm talking obvious things to some, but we can change it, of course. So we'll see how to deal with that. We can change it is, I think, it's very interesting response, because what would be our goal with changing it really? So we'll see in the coming minutes that the way to deal with that not necessarily means changing it, meaning that we cannot always bring the world back to order or bring it back to this cause and effect relationships that we want to have, so that we can again do our planning and we can again feel safe and reduce our fear. But we can respond to the nature of the world in a different way than we are used to. So let's see how it goes. So at that point, I would like to introduce to you a concept that has a weird name. That name is Cynefin. And I don't have this on the slide, but I will type it. And if you know it, then you know what this is. If you don't, then it may come to you that this is an unusual pronunciation of this word. But so word Cynefin is a Welsh word, and it means a habitat. This term is used to describe a framework for decision making that was described by David Snowden. So this is basically his work that we'll be talking about now, and this is really a foundational work when it comes to understanding the nature of the things with which we deal in the Vuca world and how we should really respond to them. So what Snowden brings is so he calls it an ontology. So that's really not a categorization of problems, but this is acknowledgement of the nature of the problems. And there is a difference between the two, because categorization can happen in many different ways, and it depends on people's opinions, it depends on points of view. We can see things differently. Ontology rather recognizes and acknowledges that things are the way they are, and it doesn't really depend on our preference. So we'll be talking about the way that things are. And Snowden brings 4 categories for the nature of things. By things, I mean, well, for us, dealing with life or dealing with business, this would mean problems that we have to face in our Vuca world. So let's start on the right bottom, because this is what is most natural for us to understand. Obvious problems, well, they are basically obvious problems. So what does it mean? This means that we can find a solution to the problem. We can find the root cause for a problem and a solution to the problem. And this is usually single best solution to our problem. So can we think of an example of that? We should be able to find a lot of examples. So like, I couldn't connect to our meeting today so easily as I wanted. Okay, I needed to diagnose that, and I found that I'm clicking on the wrong link. Oh, the solution is simple. I need the right link. And there's really no other solution. So it sounds maybe obvious itself, but so these kinds of problems are everywhere, but they are easy to solve because the solution is obvious. And they are not the majority of the problems that we face in Vuca world. So let's go to the other category. The other category is complicated problems. So complicated problems are like obvious, but they don't have a simple solution. But the solution exists. there may be also more than one solution. So we can deal with the problem like our engine in our car stopped and the car won't go anymore. So what do we do to fix that? We need to do some diagnosis, but hey, we're not maybe mechanical, so we need to invite some expert who will come and do the diagnosis and will come up with the idea what's wrong. Oh, we need to, I don't know, whatever, put the fuel in the tank and the car will go. But maybe we need to do something else. So there needs to be some expert knowledge involved in diagnosing the problem, diagnosing a complicated problem. And also, if we invite many experts, then each of those experts can come up with a different solution to our problem, and they all can work. So the case with the car, maybe it's really more obvious than the complicated, but the case with the, let's see. So most of the technical problems would be complicated problems. So like how to solve algorithmic problem, how to write a program that does something. Not everyone knows that, but there are people who do, and there are many programming languages. It's a complicated problem, but after some thinking, we can deal with that. So if we think about schools and the educational system, there are, of course, differences between different countries and different parts of the world, but generally, majority of the educational systems today prepare students to deal with obvious and complicated problems because they can be solved scientifically. So in both cases, the common characteristic is that the relationship between a cause and effect exists. So if we find the right knob or the right button to push, then we can predict exactly the results, and the results will be, for example, solving our problem. So Snowden calls obvious and complicated problems, those two kinds, orderly domain. So order exists here. Now let's move to the left side of the picture. Complex domain of the problems is the predominant domain that exists in the Vuca world. And that's why it's also the most interesting from our point of view. So what's the difference between complicated and complex? And it's not sometimes an easy difference. So complex problems don't have solutions in a way that we can diagnose a root cause and come up with a prescription how to solve a problem. Complexity, and this can mean the complexity in the mathematical form, causes that the things which we see don't have an easy explanation. And then they usually don't have an explanation which can be found using some mechanism of reasoning. So what we observe in such case are some patterns. So we observe some regularities. But whether one thing is a direct cause of another thing that is happening, we cannot say that basically. So the other characteristic of complex problem is that the same problem in two different situations can have different solutions. So what we find as a way of dealing with problem in one environment is not directly transplantable to another environment. This makes it yet more difficult to deal with them. So majority of the problems which are involving humans are really complex problems, and that's why majority of the problems with which humans deal are complex problems. Then the fourth domain that we have is called chaotic. And chaotic domain is really a domain in which no rules apply. So we cannot really see any patterns happening. And the predictability is completely out. It was already out in the complex problems, but with chaotic, we cannot even observe patterns. I wouldn't say they are the majority of the problems, they're rather minority, or they are exceptions. But when they happen, things go pretty much crazy. So this kind of a cross that intersects those areas is I think it's even a trademark of Canadian. I'm not sure, but it's drawn in a way that it tries to picture this as a habitat. So we have to understand with which problems we are dealing. If we don't really know, then we end up in the middle of this picture, so in the black hole. And there is the fourth domain, which is not specifically written here, but that's called unknown, basically. So still waiting to be determined. So we haven't talked yet about how to deal with those problems, but yet I think the most important thing is the distinction between the left side and the right side. The right side, meaning complicated and obvious, this is this orderly space. So we can expect order. We can expect cause and effect relationships. On the left side, with the complex and chaotic, this is called an orderly space. And with an orderly space, there is no cause and effect relationship. So how does this affect us as humans? I think the biggest problem here is that we are wired internally to see everything more on the right side than on the left side. So we have natural inclination to treat problems as solvable in a scientific way. And in reality, in majority of the problems are not solvable that way. And this is the reason for, inability to solve problems in an effective way, inability to get results, and moreover, a lot of frustration with the people who try to solve problems. So if we try to apply the solutions from the complicated space to the complex problems, this increases our probability that we will just degrade this problem into chaos. And this happens, I saw this many times, this happens a lot, and this, of course, in turn causes even more stress and even more craziness and frustration. So understanding to which domain the problems with which we deal belongs is absolutely crucial to consciously approach their solution. I would stop for a while and see if there are any questions or there are any comments about it. Or is it clear?
Anyone? Feel free to put something into the
So we can also try differently. So maybe there is somebody who would like to give some example of a complex problem or a complicated problem, or maybe a case in which somebody treated complicated problem and complex, or the other way around. Do you have any experience with that?
guys, don't be shy.
Okay, so I'll give one because, I can give more than one, but I think my domain is software development, and in software, it's really very common to make this so things like, so teams face sometimes that things don't work according as they should when it comes to the software development process. For example, code review doesn't work well. Well, people expect delays, and they cannot get good quality comments, or they have to wait for a long time for the comments. And this is, I think, almost all cases I saw this was approached the way as the complicated problem would be approached. So drawing diagrams, counting number of days in which each stage is, and then trying to find the root cause why let's say the problem is that it lasts too long. Why? What is lasting long? What is the reason? And then going to that particular area and trying to fix it. So to shorten the time. We shorten the time. So we should expect the overall results to be shorter too. So people make analysis, they make they make new rules, they introduce new processes. Nothing improves. Things got even worse. And everyone is confused. I saw this many times. And the reason for why this is happening that way is that code review process in software development really is a complex process. It's not complicated, it's not obvious, because it involves humans, and humans who have to be part of the system will not behave predictably, and they will be not susceptible to our attempts to fine-tune the process. So that's just one example that's close to my domain.
Hey, Pawel, sorry to interrupt you. So Debashish has raised his hand. I'm not sure if maybe it was another problem use case, so I'm inviting Debashish to the stage.
Okay, please.
Hi, Pawel. A really a very, very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for bringing this up today. A few comments and probably we'll end with a question. I feel this is extremely relevant to the startup founders, because they are dealing with really situations which almost can get categorized in all of these four quadrants, which starts with an obvious one. I can give an example of probably the easiest one, which is an obvious one. The reason for starting up a startup is about bringing a change. You have an interesting product where you want customers to adopt, which will make, at the end of the day, life easy for the customers. The complicated matter is that how do you convince your customer to give up the old habit and adopt a new one? Well, the complex matter is that probably the customer is already used to a something similar product, and whether the customer will be willing to give that up for a new thing. Just correct me if I'm getting it right. And chaotic will be where you have 200 customers with 200 demands on your product, and you don't know how to manage. Have I got it right?
I think the chaotic is very right. Yes, so something unexpected happens, and there's no, state of equilibrium there anymore. For the complex, right. I think. So I think you made some statement which is trying. I may be wrong, but I read this as trying to say what is the root cause of the problem, trying to predict.
Absolutely.
So if we do this, then maybe this will happen, and that's not working that way in the complex domain. But I agree generally that the way how to make the customers adopt our new great product is definitely a complex problem.
Yeah, so I think
we'll get to that. Go ahead.
I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know whether it's covered in the later part of the presentation. Is how do we train the manager to categorize the problems in these four quadrants? How will he understand the problem? I'm sure obvious is pretty simple. How do we, the rest of the three C's is where most of the managers will become confused to categorize their problem into. So this was my question.
So there is no good test for that. I think the first indication is that if we try regular solutions as in the complicated domain and they don't work, there is an indication this is not a complicated but complex problem. This is the first indication, right?
Okay.
And it happens very often, I think, because we as managers often will try to bring into life something like a plan. So I try to get my things in order and bring predictability into my life and my problem. So if I do A, B, C, the D will happen. But hey, the D doesn't happen. F happens. And you do this 1, 2, 3, and if you repeat that, this is complex problem. That's a test. But to say, okay, that's a test by experiment. Of course, it may be too late for some case or for some class of the problems then. The other way would be to have more than one person assess this, to bring more perspective into that. Because we are really, really inclined to treat everything as complicated, not complex. This is very easy to deceive ourselves. But if you bring somebody else who looks from that from a different angle, can really kick us out of our, way of thinking.
Okay.
And probably the problem of distinguishing complicated from complex is complex too. So needs application of the same methods to solve it as the problems themselves.
Great. Thank you so much, Pawel.
Let's see. So this is a different way of looking at that. If you dig deeply into that and look into the internet, find the ways. Now we have a release of a book by Snowden that's called Canevin, to a surprise. Last week or 2 weeks ago released. I haven't read this, but it has a lot of these terms explained. So these are so Snowden brings this way of approaching problems, which is here written in the blue font. And here he calls obvious is known and complicated is knowable, doesn't change the concept. So he says, what do we do? And for simple things, for obvious things, we sense categorize response. So it's in a way, it's not a simple language, but it means look around what this is, try to categorize. So say what things are and then execute your plan. For complicated, this is sense analyze response. So it's the same as with obvious, but instead of categorization, which is really a simple process, we need to do some analysis. Important thing is that we respond after we analyze. In the complex domain, we probe, sense, respond. So that's the fundamental distinction. How to deal with complex problems is that we must to get into interaction with the system in order to try to understand the patterns which emerge. And only then we can come up with our response to the system, after which we will again do some interactions and probing, and we'll see how it goes. So there is a pretty good idealization of this as we get on the stage and start dancing. And as we dance on the stage, we see we only as we are part of the system, we can understand more about how the system works. But also, as we are part of the system, we change the way that the system works. So the way we make our changes also changes the system. And then we can observe if the whole system evolves in a direction that is desired for us. And it's difficult because this has nothing to do with the regular planning technique. So there is, I switch to that. There is, from the lean development comes the idea that is called the Toyota Kata. Toyota is known from its implementation of lean management system and the tremendous improvement in the manufacturing and in business that they made. But so this is directly applicable to the complex problems domain. How to read this? The point number 4 is most important. Point number 1 and 2, this sets the stage basically. So we are where we are and we know where we want to go. But we know it only in the terms of the desired direction, not very precise goal. Then, as we get on the stage and start playing with the things, we may figure out number 3. So we may figure out where do we go very short term. And this in a way resembles the agile methodologies, which are iterative and incremental. But now to get to this next small step towards the direction in which we want to move, we need to do what number 4 says. And this is, we need to execute experiments. So the response to the complex problem is experimentation. It's not planning. It's not predictability. And experimentation means that sometimes we go in the direction of our target, sometimes we'll go back, but overall, with many experiments, we should be moving roughly where we want to go. The experimentation methodology, that's sometimes called adaptive moves. So what we do is that we need to, let's say we have some complex problem, sometimes we call it complex dilemma in mind. So to solve this, we really need to design and execute a number of experiments, not a plan. And when we design those experiments, so they all constitute kind of a portfolio of experiments. So we will have among them some naive experiments. And that's also not common for traditional management to do this, because managers sometimes have this tendency to say, tell me how you're going to solve this problem. Be sure how you're going to solve this problem. Oh, you're not an expert, so you're not the appropriate person to solve this problem. Adaptive moves says something else. It says we need to get as many diverse points of view as possible, because then when we're designing our experiments, maybe it's the one that's not an expert that will come up with the right idea that will change the state. And remember, there's no cause-effect relationship. So we don't really know how this happens. So we need to include some high risk but high return experiments, and they will likely fail. But if they don't, we'll get big return on them. We need to include experiments that are contradicting themselves. That's also not very natural. And sometimes we cannot afford this, but generally, we have a better chance of success with the complex problems if we design the experiments which cover as much as possible. And we need to run those experiments concurrently. That's also not natural to the traditional management, which will say, okay, show me the results from your idea A, and then we'll talk about if we do B. That's wrong. That's not how we're dealing with complex problems. What we do is that we do A, B, C, D, E, F. We do them all at the same time and observe the state of the system. Where is this moving? So if we think about a single experiment, single adaptive move, then a very important thing is that they have to be safe to fail. So also Also something not obvious, well, more and more obvious, fortunately, but still we have to struggle with that. So the actions which we'll take are too often expected to be successful, and that's wrong with the complex dilemmas. Some of our actions will fail, and the experiments which we design, of course, need to be safe to fail. So we cannot plant a bomb and hope it will not blow because the consequences will be too big. And we need to be able to realize those experiments within, I say here, few months. Timeline can be shorter, but longer are usually not useful because the conditions of the world will change that it won't make sense. It may not make sense anymore. Okay, so that's how we approach that. We don't do plans, we don't do single-threaded actions, we run concurrent number of safe-to-fail experiments. And we call this adaptive moves. Okay, good. Any comments? No comments. I'm looking at the time. How are we doing on that? So do we have 10 minutes? That's right.
We have got 15 more minutes, but we can over.
Let's see what we'll cover. Maybe not everything. I'll try to. Okay, so I wanted to talk briefly also about measurements, because so emerging from the orderly space of problems is what we call scientific management culture, and this ties back to Frederick Taylor, who is the father of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of businesses were made at the end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century, just by realization that we can optimize the processes which we use for manufacturing and get better results for the whole system. So the foundation of getting efficiency with this scientific management culture is that we put measurements, we put monitoring, and we exercise control in order to make sure that the parts of the system work as we want them to work. So this ends up with something like this great Charlie Chaplin movie. And it was very successful method for a long time until the Vuca world really knocked at our door. So it stopped to be useful today, but still, I think in many cases I'm seeing that we try to approach again the complex problems with the scientific method solutions. So we try to optimize parts of the systems in order waiting for the results for the whole system to work differently. Well, except for the simple, for the obvious and complicated problems, it doesn't work like that anymore. There is one very interesting phenomena which I'd like to share also. So there is what's called the Goodhart's law. And it's related to measuring things very much. And it says that any observed statistical regularity will tend to collapse once pressure is placed upon it for control purposes. So why I'm bringing this here is that if we do our adaptive moves and experimentation in order to deal with our complex dilemma, we will know eventually, we will want to know, are we going in the right direction or not? And it's a complex problem itself, but the natural way of dealing with that is that we want to apply some, how do we call this? KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics, so that we know that we are going in the right direction. Now, if we deal with the complex problems, and part of the complex problems will be almost always humans, or societies, or teams, then we'll eventually fall in the trap of what Goodhart described. So if we apply a KPI in order to reach some goal, immediately this KPI stops working towards the goal. And the whole system starts executing towards fulfilling the KPI, not the goal. It has a really, really dramatic consequences. And there is a great book that's called The Tyranny of Metrics that explains hundreds of examples from the healthcare around the world, the healthcare industry, educational systems, where putting KPIs in place bring exactly opposite results. So, and it's common. And there are ways of dealing with that. I won't talk about this now, but I want to bring it here to indicate that if we want to measure with the complex dilemma the direction in which we go, KPIs are not a good way of doing that. Surveys within the people are not also a very good ways of doing that, but that's for another reason, because people usually know what answers are expected from the one that makes a survey, and either they respond with this answer in order to satisfy the requester, or they are so frustrated that they respond totally opposite. But what it gives us is rather a lack of good insight into where things are. What instead works well, and this is expressed very well, I stole it from some presentation to which source I gave here, but I love this formula. So it says humans are meaning-making machines, and when faced with complexity, they are very good at creating stories to explain the world. So this means that basically we are storytellers, and it's easier for us to tell stories than to respond to surveys or to measure numerical indicators. How can we use that for our purpose of assessing the direction in which we are moving or the state in which we are in? So there is a methodology which is called sense making. That also the pioneer of that, I think, was Snowden, the inventor of Canevin. So this methodology is based on telling stories. So there are two parts to that. So the first one is we let people tell short stories of things that happen. And that's it. The second part is that we design some questions to which they can respond, and they are not obvious questions, but they are used to give meaning to the story in the context of our problem that we're going to deal with. So I can give you an example. I put here, this is a true example. And of course, this is from the software development domain. So that one is related to the DevOps and DevOps transformation. And I skip, doesn't matter what this really is. So some employee in an organization put as part of this sense-making activity a story when described a real case from the life. And it says that during nightly test of the product, they were getting some sporadic failures, blah, 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 and they opened the ticket, and the ticket waited 2 months, and nobody cared about the ticket. Okay. So people put stories like that, and there will be positive or negative stories. There will be stories which make them happy or unhappy. And we then let them evaluate these stories. So this is called the signification. So we let them give the meaning to the stories. So in this case, I'll just show you an example. We let them evaluate whether their story was here more to the left or the right of those categories. They do it. Then we can ask them, so what feelings are there associated with that? They can put this. And what we really get out of that at the end is ability to picture patterns. So the patterns which are the basis for relationships of things in the complex problems domain. So in that case, doesn't matter the case, I just want you to show that from the stories and this signification of the stories, we can get to the real chart that, okay, managers love charts, and they have colors and they have some shapes here. And we can try to make conclusions about what is happening with our system. So in that case, are we moving in the right directions towards the DevOps culture in our organization, and what's stopping us from that, which is a complex problem? And there are no good or bad answers here, but you can obviously see that there is like a middle red line or a stick forming on the chart, and it's rather red than green, and it's in the middle. So there is some correlation between the negative business impact and strong focus on results, and so on. So it doesn't matter this particular case, but to show the methodology. Then we can look at that chart, which is very meaningful, and we can see what feelings are happening in the team when they talk about things which really happened to them. So here we see a lot of negative emotions, discouragement, stress, concern, but hey, in the middle there is hope. Hope is green, that's an accident. Nobody put this color here, but it's green. So then what do we do about this? So we have this information, we run our experiments, so we need, of course, the team to be set up in a way that we observe what's happening in the system using sense making. We have the people who are giving us this feedback through the stories which happen to them, and we evaluate constantly that, and we react to that, inventing new experiments so that we observe again after some time whether those dots, maybe they're becoming green, maybe they're forming in a different point, different areas, whatever is our goal. So that methodology allows us to get the results in the complex domain without really giving us insight into how this is all happening. And that's important because we cannot scientifically make this analysis work. Here I have like another set of charts which emerge from that exercise, from the sense making, and well, they may have a very good impact on senior management who like green and red. So here we can see where we are, and here we can say which is preferred for our organization in that case, and where we are. So those gauges should actually start moving in certain direction when we start executing our experiments. And here I am at the end of what I planned to share. So I'd like to make some recap and summary. I think I try to put it this way. We live in a Vuca world, and there is nothing we can do about that world. So we cannot change the world. But we can learn how to recognize the difference between the complex and complicated problems, and we can learn how to deal properly with that. Specifically, we should not insist on solving complex problems with complicated techniques. Those techniques appropriate for complicated problems. Because we will fall into chaos, and we will need to exert more and more control, which will later lead to more chaos. Okay. So we can learn adaptive methods and adaptive leadership that can help us navigate through those complex dilemmas. I think we should forget about traditional metrics and KPIs when it comes to complex dilemmas, because they very often bring opposite results. It's absolutely astonishing how it doesn't discourage even big organizations from using them anyway. There is a lot of evidence that just proves that this is true. So the last one, instead of that, I would suggest look at sense-making and storytelling methodology, because it can help especially larger organizations to give good insight into how things are. Smaller organizations can do this directly, probably, through just human interactions, relationships, and talking. If you face 100, 200, 1,000 people in the organization, it's not possible to talk to everyone for kind of a management who wants to, I don't know, make a change in the organization. Those 3 books are the books that I find very inspiring and help me a lot. So I'd like to share them with you. Maybe you will find them that way too. Especially the first one, Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal, is something I would absolutely recommend to read. It's just amazing read. I'm still trying to control the time, so I was not really letting the questions to come on so, but this is the end of what I prepared.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Pawel. Thank you. If you want, you can stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just me, but I can.
How is everybody? Asleep or not?
Okay, come on, guys. Let's get some feedback here. Anybody wants to come on stage? Okay, then let me maybe pick someone from the audience. Nobody wants to come. Alexander, why don't you raise your hands and come on stage? Let us know your feedback. People are very shy today. I don't know if it's the Tuesday effect. Nobody? Okay, there we go. Chat. Okay. Hi, Roger. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Come on, guys. Feedback is super important. I personally, I love this session. I have never seen this Cinefin framework, even though I've heard about it. And Devashish and I were discussing actually in parallel to see if we should do a deep dive workshop with Pawel to see how we can implement some of those things at Mainstage Incubator. Would be really interesting. So, who else is there? Come on, please don't be shy.
So for me, maybe I didn't, I wasn't maybe too good in explaining that, but for me personally, getting familiar with that is like changing permanently your life even. The way you look at things are never the same again. And sometimes it causes problems.
Yeah, definitely. Come on, let's hear it from the audience. Who wants to raise their hand and come on stage? Oh, there you go. Jorge, yeah, why don't you raise your hand, Jorge? Share your experience. So on the top there's a hand.
With speaking through audio because it's writing on the chat.
Yeah. So Jorge, I hope I pronounced that right. On the top right, there is a raise your hand button. If you press that, you can come on stage and share your feedback. Okay, I think everyone is shy, Pawel, to come on stage. Before we close off, there's a possibility to interact with us or with Pawel directly as well at the networking table. So once I end the session will not be over. You can still meet at the networking tables and talk to each other and network. Debashish, do you have any closing remarks as well? Okay, so Jorge is asking to raise his hands. So Debashish, if we just wait a second. So in the browser, if you go to the top right, there should be a raise your hand button. Like on the right, it says chat, attendees, and then there's somewhere should be a raise your hand button. It's like you're using the light version. Okay, so maybe that it's not over there. So what we can do is we can network at the table as well if you want to share that. I think that should be possible. Okay, now Debashish has taken back his request. Oh no, there you go. There you go.
Hi, I'm back again. Pawel, thank you so much for the really insightful presentation. I mean, really thought-provoking, and myself and Sven were actually chatting on the side and thinking about two things. One is looking at implementing some of them in our Mainstage incubator ecosystem, as well as looking at doing a slightly more deep dive workshop with our portfolio startups, because our startups actually experience this situation, the Vuca situation, every day. I would say maybe 5 times every day. So, and especially with COVID, doesn't seem to fade away. It's only aggravating, and if there is a framework in which they can put their problems in, and they can find, may not be a solution, but at least a right path, will definitely give them a lot more confidence in this kind of uncertain situation, where lack of confidence is more often than not is the reason for their suffering or closure. So I think we will plan another session with especially with the startups who are going through this. They are the most vulnerable lot. Thank you so much, Pawel. Thank you so much for giving this insightful presentation.
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks everyone for attending. I would encourage we look for people who are deep experts in the field. I do not consider myself an expert, although I'm practitioner of some of those methods. But we can definitely arrange things for the startups.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you everyone for joining. And like I said, the session is not over. Once we get off the stage, we can meet at the networking tables and take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.